Good morning, Adrian. How are you?
Good morning, Pete. Very well, thank you. It's been a little while since we did our last session, but lovely to see you as always.
Thank you. Yes, it has. It's holiday season, I guess, isn't it? As we say in the UK, or vacation, as they say elsewhere. And
Yes, yes, or shut down, as they say in Germany.
right. Yeah, okay, that's got more of an IT ring to it, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
That mean people get switched off and switched on again.
Power recycled. Yeah, that's good. I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So yes, and I'm off on shutdown as well for a couple of weeks next weekend. So I guess we should treat this one as our summer holiday special. How's that?
It is, and again, quite apt really, because whilst I was walking on my holidays, on the many walks that we actually did, I was walking along a nice sea coastal route, and on the path there, I saw an old USB device, just lying on the floor, unattended. It's very tempted to pick it up. But then a little thing popped in my head. A little bubble of Pete came up. So don't do that. And it's one of the very first things that I think you taught me. So I thought, yeah, what a really good way to present another sort of threat blog, really vlog, whatever you'd like to call it, about certainly an old method of threat and attack, but certainly after reviewing a lot of the current news and articles about threats, attacks, vectors, and such, it's become very prevalent again. So it's a bit about USB attacks. We're going to dig back into the annals of Pete's mind again, and we'll certainly see what comes up.
Okay, well, some of it's still working, so it hasn't completely deteriorated yet. I'll do my best. I think, yeah, I've got quite a lot of thoughts about that topic, in fact, both historical and current.
So first and foremost, USB attacks. On my research, I found over 29 different ways to attack people via a USB stick. First, and let's stick to the USB sticks to start with. And I was horrified again because you and I have had many conversations and much to do with vectors. Let's just cover that first little bit really about how you can certainly be attacked via a USB stick.
Okay, right, just off the top of my head, the original attacks were often quite simplistic and focused on Windows computers, using a flaw or a feature in Windows to do with auto run. And I think that's probably been patched now, but basically if you would insert one of these USB sticks as it mounted, then an auto run executable batch file, I think, originally would run and enable the attacker to do whatever they wanted with the credentials or the authority of the person that was logged in. And at this point, I'll make that point because it comes up over and over again, and that is that still a large number of people, particularly, of course, at home and remote working, will be logged in with what is functionally admin privilege on whatever machine they're using. And that means, of course, that it's a little easier for what I would think of as a local attack, which of course a USB stick attack is. It's actually on the machine. It's much easier for that attack to be successful because of the enhanced privileges that it has by virtue of the person who's logged in at that time. And in-person attacks, whether the person is a person or the person is a device that someone has left lying around, is so much more powerful than a remote attack. You're not looking at any of the traditional internet defenses, of course. And I guess the most, I mean, we've done these attacks as part of ethical hacking exercises over many years. And disappointingly, it works as well in a server room as it does at an endpoint. But the sort of attacks will be executables, will be insertion of malware, will be data theft, can be keyboard simulator, which is quite fun, where the USB device actually takes over and acts as a keyboard. Those are still for sale. I had a little look before our chat today. And so there are many, many different vectors, and probably the most, I don't know whether famous is the right word, but the most well-known use of a USB drive was in part of that attack against the let's get this right, Iranian nuclear program, I think. And yeah,
was that the USB kill specific one?
It was part of a long chain attack that basically went through a USB key in a endpoint device that was connected to PLCs, so an operational technology network, allowed them to run exploits against the application software that was controlling the centrifuges for refinement of the nuclear product. And it was extremely famous at the time, so famous I can't remember the name of it, of course, but it was allegedly co-developed by the Americans and the Israelis. And then it fell into criminal hands and got abused for attacks against many other entities.
And clearly those sorts of vectors are still being abused these days. Again, but it's not just about the auto run pieces either now. It is about sort of programmable microcontrollers inside the USB keys. Some of them are now in moving away from the USB key type of things in USB peripherals that can be maliciously armed, I suppose is the correct terminology, with different vectors of attack. As you mentioned, some of those things previously in terms of what those vectors run, but also sort of key emulators being another one of those in really sort of tracking people's and transferring the information of people's passwords directly from the computer itself.
Sure.
As you say, emulation of devices, keyboards to sort of run specific threats, which I guess is a really good one because it being localized on that actual machine.
Sure. I mean, those keyboard simulators do exactly what it says on the tin. They act as though someone were sitting at the keyboard and typing directly into the computer. So that's really elegant. And for anybody who bothers to watch this video and gets frustrated at my memory, the previous reference was to Stuxnet.
Stuxnet, okay.
Back in 2010 and something that was apparently being developed since 2005, allegedly. But that was all about attacking the operational technology equipment. But of course, it got deployed in lots of other uses. But you know, those are quite sophisticated attacks and multi-layered. And I think that's possibly what people might miss. That just because it's on a little USB stick doesn't mean that it can't have many, many layers to it, just as clever malware will, if delivered, you know, through a phishing attack with a PDF file or something.
Exactly, and doesn't just need to be activated by an auto run requiring maybe privilege and access as well.
No, indeed. There's many low-level attacks depending what operating system you're targeting. Obviously, in the OT world, you're going to be finding much older versions of things like Windows, so it's kind of easier. But even in today's world, there are plenty of exploits that could be run and are being highlighted in the articles that we looked at before this chat. But you mentioned also USB connected devices, and of course that's tons more powerful, because if you're, say, plugging in a USB printer, first of all, in the printer, you've got a processor that can be deployed. You've got a trusted relationship between the computer and the printer, which is always bidirectional, because you want to know when you're running out of paper, or Hewlett Packard want to sell you more ink or something. And talking about Hewlett Packard, I'll come back to that. But yeah, intelligent devices being plugged in and arriving on the consumer's desk preloaded with malware is, I guess, the key thing. That happened for a while with USB sticks, where they would come with malware allegedly directly from the factory. And I've
yeah, so I remember some of those with both Kingston and I forget one of the other ones were now, but we'll certainly post a link about some of those in the posts when we put the video up. But yeah, there's some of those old ones where they were actually shipped from factory with malware preloaded on them.
Yeah.
Scary times.
It is, and if you can get into the supply chain somewhere along there and put some malware in, even if it's not coming from the manufacturer, there are going to be a lot of opportunities for a malicious agent to infect a device or a machine before it reaches the consumer.
Absolutely, and again, linking back to some of our previous episodes, it is about the supply chain at times in certainly modern day access to a lot of these devices. And it can relate back to the actual factory design, who has access to that at those factory levels, although there are extra precautionary measures taken by the likes of your Apples, your HPs and whoever's producing these, usually these days, in the cheapest places possible for manufacturing, Far East.
Yeah.
Then they certainly does pose a severe threat to your supply chain.
Yes, it does. And if we're thinking about the hybrid working world we now live in, home users who are working as the name implies from home, then isn't it going to be attractive, particularly as money gets tighter at the moment, to buy second-hand equipment off eBay? And or not just finding a USB stick in the street, that old joke, but maybe buying a webcam or a printer or some other peripheral device, maybe a used hard drive even on eBay or some other second-hand site, and not understanding that that's the perfect vector to infect people. And it cuts both ways. We always teach people not to get rid of equipment without wiping it properly first. Mm-hmm. But this is the other side of the coin. When you're buying equipment, you might not expect to find someone else's data on there, but you certainly don't expect to find malware on there. And yet, it's a perfect attack vector, I think.
It is. And again, people shouldn't be relying, as we said before, on typical desktop antivirus, which really doesn't pick up enough of the malware that's out there. They do their best to certainly upgrade new data files and heuristic programs, but they're certainly nowhere near enough done by those sort of home-based desktop programs. As we said before, if you're remote working and your works offer you a decent endpoint protection, take them up on it. It's well worthwhile.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the things that people have said to me when I've mentioned USB connected threats is, doesn't data loss prevention software stop this as a problem? Well, again, my response to that is, it's kind of in the name. Yeah, it will maybe stop data loss, but is it necessarily going to be defending the machine against something more serious that's going the other way, that's trying to infect the machine? As you rightly say, whatever AV you have on the machine may not be enough. I don't think any of it will be. And on home computers, there's no guarantee that the signature files are going to be up to date anyway, and neither the patching on a Windows machine necessarily. So,
and data loss prevention systems work in very, very different ways. Again, I think that's probably something that we should cover in another episode, really, because although there is a massive prevalence towards Microsoft in remote working in these very odd times post-pandemic, in these endemic times, but with the advent of other more corporate-based systems that are out there, that whole data loss prevention piece, it does aid in people stopping downloading certain files into their systems, but there's still a great prevalence in people actually using USB keys themselves in transferring data from their work systems and carrying it home to the home-based system. So there again is another problem in terms of bypassing that whole data loss prevention system. So again, people using those sort of devices and USB hard drives, for instance, are causing themselves other whole worlds of hurt.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, with the size of the data files we're dealing with these days, there's, even the idea of transferring via the cloud can be too onerous for people if we're talking about large data files. And so USB is an obvious choice. And I don't think many, if any, certainly in the private sector, organizations can afford to say, for example, USB is banned, which is something they tried to do a few years ago, and say you can't use any USB devices. Well, it's the USB and Bluetooth are now the default way of connecting peripherals, so that ain't going to happen. And
certainly if you're a school or a charity as well, that certainly isn't a thing that many schools have performed with their systems. Sure.
And really simulating another device. There's an article I've been staring at while we've been talking by my old mate Andy Rose on itp.net that mentions that he says more recent attacks have moved to human interface device spoofing, which is what we were talking about, where the USB stick pretends to be a keyboard. And he describes this more elegantly than I'm able to, so I'm just going to nick Andy's comment. As it's inserted, the stick registers as a keyboard/mouse and delivers commands, automating an attack as if the hacker was sitting at a desk. It is this bad USB technique, as it's called, that an attack called Fin7 used to start the first stages of their recent ransomware attack. So there's another motive for impregnating USB devices with something naughty. It's another vector for the ransomware people to use over and above the traditional phishing and waterhole attacks.
And again, another good one on that one, using a similar method and emulating a keyboard and mouse is the whole USB drive-by vector of attack as well, which unlocked Mac OS X via USB in a matter of seconds. So again, you can't just put this down to Windows type pieces. So again,
much as I normally enjoy doing so, you're quite right. I don't think any devices are necessarily invulnerable at all. You mentioned USB kill earlier, not something I'd looked at actually, but Andy mentions that as well. And now I remember watching the video, which is a very clever little device that you plug into the USB port, and then it just zaps the computer with a high voltage pulse from a capacitor, presumably, and so it charges itself up and then discharges the capacitor at high voltage and fries the computer.
Yeah, which relates back to the whole Iranian attack thing, isn't it? Because that's exactly what they did with that vector attack. They went in and used that sort of electrical overload to kill the devices that were controlling the power station heating system.
That's different from the nuclear attack. That Stuxnet was about controlling the app that controlled the centrifuges and causing the centrifuges to do something that my friend Frank would understand, but I wouldn't. But anyway, spinning at the wrong speed or something, destabilizing. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of those sorts of attacks, and as Andy concludes, and I think this is a point worth thinking about, it's going to be something that the attackers, the criminals and so on, are going to work on to find other ways to use the USB stack to attack people. And, we talked about rootkits living in firmware and so on last time we chatted. That's right. Again, a USB stick is a great way to deliver that sort of malware. And the whole thing might take place without the poor user being aware at all that anything's happened.
So preventative measures still in these types of attacks before we move on to other type of devices could still be about USB tie down or lockdown to certain restricted type of input. So not allowing everything to be installed or uploaded via USB, and that is required on sort of administrative IT levels.
Yeah.
So certainly from a corporate level or even a remote working level on a corporate type device.
Yeah.
Those who are using bring your own device type systems, not so easy. But again, schools, and I have certainly performed so myself in some instances, blocked USB being installed as a default method. It can be met with a lot of antipathy, certainly, but is a good method of protection.
Sure.
Again, 0-day software or agents are another method for helping mitigate such attacks. But again, it is about knowing where your devices come from and generally being very careful with those type of USB type sticks or hard drives.
We used to use a sheep dip approach. So we'd have a sacrificial machine not connected to any network, and any USB came into the office, were plugged into that. Whole barrage of tests run against it, because you can get quite deep and sexy with some of the analysis software. Not something you want to install on a typical endpoint, but on a dedicated machine. That principle came as an anti-malware approach, but could easily be deployed for any other malicious activity as well. And in a corporate environment, it would be trivial to have a few machines scattered around the place that are used as that sanitization, that sheep dip initial entry point. And once what I would do and what we did do was, once a USB stick had been through that, then it was given a sticker to say that it'd been through that. And therefore it was safe to use until it left the building again. So there's mitigation techniques that aren't difficult, but which are possibly things that the average company isn't thinking about.
No, but we're worth thinking about in this line of what has become a reinvigorated type of vector. So again, interesting one. Okay, so moving on a little bit from that, we then get to phones, and certainly on this sort of type of device, looking at then charging in the public charging points.
Yes. Oh, that's lovely fun. Let me get the right terminology up in front of me. So we were talking about this, weren't we? And I looked at this particular vector many years ago. I think it goes back to 2010. Although this means more than one thing, and I don't recommend everybody Googles this term straight away, is juice jacking. And basically it's where there's a public charging point. Yes, it is a charging point, but at the same time, it uses that USB connection to infect the phone. And that's great fun. And that's something that's at least 12 years old, and yet it's still prevalent. We're still seeing it happening, and possibly more so these days because of the massive focus on mobile devices.
Yeah, and certainly the more hungry apps that are using a lot of power in mobile devices, again across the board. It's not just about Apple; it is about Androids and many of the other type of devices as well. Once you plug in a normal cable that are usually provided in these sort of public charging facilities into your phone, you are effectively allowing access of that sort of public charging station and whatever network that's connected to your phone.
Yep, absolutely. And it's trivial enough. I mean, I've seen very elegant devices that appear that you can't really see. You know how you would have a balun on a cable to protect against RF, hiding keyloggers and stuff inside something that looks just like a balun, and which people would not be suspicious of, or even inside the connector itself. Surprising as that sounds, I mean, obviously, these days, chips is very small, governor, and fitting them inside,
Yeah.
a connector that, hello camera, that looks like that is not too difficult.
Yeah. So it isn't just about the public provider of these charging devices, but anyone who's had access to it could actually put a balance in there to then transfer your data, or certainly be a go-between device that they can retrieve at a later time to grab data.
Yeah.
Now, that is feasible, and again, when we're talking about other block type charging facilities like these as well, they're also capable of doing exactly that. Also, they can have many different pieces in there, and it may just seem like a harmless block that you could use to charge your phone that you borrow off a friend, or even buying off anywhere else. They can also have malware pre-installed on them, or install
lots of room inside
date.
that sort of size box, lots of room to put interesting hardware in there.
Yeah.
I think people will think this is all very, James Bond or Mission Impossible, but actually, if you spend a little time with Google, you can just buy this stuff off the shelf.
Absolutely. And again, the question that we're always asked is, well, but why would people do that? Why would people target me? Again, it is a question that constantly we're asked. Many CEOs have asked that question at board level, and again, the answers are pretty much the same for everyone, because if they see you as a target by any means necessary, again, especially if you hold a position of authority in any organization, you can be a target.
Sure. We had I remember giving a talk to a room full of barristers about this, and making them think, which you would hope they would have done, that it's not about who they are, but the high profile cases they're dealing with. And the same is true for any business, that there may well be another organization somewhere in the supply chain who is the real target, and you're just a stepping stone. I mean, the whole attacks against some of the biggest fraud attacks in the world have been conducted through a supply chain vulnerability. The HVAC, for example, to get in the end, point of sale terminals. So the same is true for any of these attacks. And yeah, it's people who don't work in cyber, I think, often do miss the point. And I find this when I'm giving a talk just to local residents about personal cyber hygiene. And, nobody's going to be interested in me. So, you don't have to be. As a home user, it might not be about you at all. It might be about using you as part of a botnet, or using you as part of an unwitting porn ring. The people do, because they're nice, people don't think like that. They don't think like criminals.
Absolutely. So again, it brings us back into the whole supply chain exploitation, really, and you could be just a cog in the whole machine. Absolutely,
and I think that's something that's worthy of further chats too. The whole, I think it's raising its profile. The supply chain vulnerability is much better now. I think people are beginning to think about it more seriously. Because we would typically have as our early adopters people in the finance industry and insurance. They've been thinking about this for a long time, but as always, it takes a long time for it to trickle down to other industries and to understand where these vulnerabilities are, why.
And thankfully, so are the sort of big compliance pieces now, really thinking about the whole supply chain piece. So it's nice to see. It was a long time coming, probably too long, but at least people are considering supply chain. And I think you're right. I think we need to do a whole episode on that one, really, because there is a lot to it. It is something that we teach a lot to boards, to all levels, not just corporate. We are talking schools, we are talking senior management of any organization, We are talking charities. So again, never leave out the third sector. They are very important in that whole supply chain piece as well. So yeah, please do not consider yourself removed from these sorts of conversations if you're not a corporate.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, mate. That was a very interesting discussion.
It was, and I think very, very prevalent. I mean, and again, all just reawoken by just seeing an old USB key device on an old, well-trodden path that, although it may seem a very old method of attack and may seem, oh, well, really, what harm can it do if I just plug this into a machine? Messages are, really don't do it.
Well,
when it comes to the public device and other blocks, again, you can buy cables separately to be charge only type cables. So again, if you're looking for ways to mitigate against these attacks, there is a fairly cheap method of helping you out there. So again, everything else, so again, we are always here to help. So if you need us, again, please do contact.
thank you, Adrian. And I'm off on vacation next weekend, so I'll see you in 2 or 3 weeks.
Excellent. You too, Pete.
Bye.
Always great. Bye-bye.
Thank you.